Welcome back to the Pursuit Podcast. This month, we're going to be talking about funding, getting the money you need to start that new company, or keep your company going, or scale up. I'm your host, Jessica Rose. I'm here today with
Katerina.
Katerina, what do you do? Where do you work?
I'm the CEO and co-founder at Personably. We're a tech startup who build products to help fast-growing companies onboard their new hires.
And we're going to be talking today about funding. And I was really excited to get a chance to chat with you about Personably because it seems almost like you all have gone through every type of funding that's possible.
Not quite every type. So we didn't do a crowdfunding round.
Almost. Can you talk me through a little bit about how Personably came to be and what you all have been doing in the funding space?
Sure. So we started the company nearly a year and a half ago now. After seeing what it was like joining fast-growing startups. So I used to work at a company called Crowdcube, and my co-founder used to work at GoCardless. We basically saw what happens when you have startups that are scaling quickly and you're trying to bring new employees into that space. We basically came up with the idea from Personably after seeing that. You know, you had people like starting, like their managers weren't always there, like people didn't know what they were doing. And just these things that all fast-growing startups go through. And we're like, okay, can we build a product that will make it both easier for the managers and the people team to basically organize those things, and then also a much better experience for the new joiners. So when they start at a company, they will feel welcome and included, and like everyone's ready to see them, and they'll have their first few weeks scheduled and set out for them rather than sitting around and not knowing what they're meant to be doing. So yeah, that was the kind of the motivation. And then, after coming up with the idea, we basically spent a month talking to everybody we knew that worked in tech to find out how their onboarding experience was, to see if what we'd seen and heard from other people was typical. And the answer was yes. Everyone that we spoke to had some story that had stuck with them from their first few weeks of the company. And it wasn't just startups either. That was, I think, the biggest surprise for us. I don't know why, but we thought maybe some of the bigger companies would sort of have things together more. Like they have much bigger HR teams.
You've been around for years. Of course, y'all are doing a good job at this.
Yeah, exactly. Like you've onboarded so many people. How you can't possibly still have people starting without laptops. Like
womp womp.
Yeah, and we were wrong. So big companies have the same issues. Sometimes worse because you have, at least in startups, you kind of have one people team, so they will be responsible for like all of those things, and they'll be very overworked. Whereas at big companies, you'll have like 6 or 7 different teams that are responsible for bringing a new person in. So that'll be like IT. It'll be like a different team which is responsible for like buying equipment, and then you'll have different someone in the HR team who's responsible for setting up these training programs, someone else who's responsible for actually like creating accounts, and that might be someone external. Definitely different levels of problem. So yeah, we saw this was a problem at startups and big companies as well, and we were like, okay, can we build something that will make it easier for these companies to do this?
That sounds reasonable enough. How did you decide how much money you would need to get started? Or did you have an idea when you got started how much money you might need?
When we got started, the goal was always, can we build something that is useful enough for people to pay for? And until we've proved that, we didn't want to raise any money. Because I used to work at Crowdcube, so I used to work with companies that were coming to Crowdcube looking for equity crowdfunding. And there was a big difference between the founders who had done some work on their idea. So they'd got a prototype, they had some test users, they basically like proven that there was a problem there that people would pay for. And then you had others who would come with just an idea looking for funding. And it was just so hard to convince anybody to invest in that because it was kind of like the founders hadn't invested in it, like not even with money, but with their own time. They hadn't invested in figuring out the problem.
So that's a really fantastic point, needing to have something to show someone to either sell it and get some money or sell the idea and get some investment.
Yeah, so myself and my co-founder could both code. So I learned to code a year and a half before we started Personably. I did a course called Founders and Coders, and then I spent a year working as a freelance developer. And my co-founder kind of learned to code on the job at GoCardless. Neither of us had technical degrees, though. I did law, my co-founder did economics. So yeah, not like computer science or anything.
For listeners outside of the UK and outside of sort of the London tech bubble, you may be unfamiliar with Founders and Coders. And this is, to my knowledge, a completely free JavaScript bootcamp.
Yeah, so it's completely free. It's in person. They take on about 16 people in each cohort. There's one in London. There's also one in Nazareth now and another in Gaza. And it's completely free. And the previous cohort teaches the next cohort. So it's basically this like community that all helps each other learn to code. And we've actually so our first software engineer hire was somebody who learned to code with me alongside that course.
That sounds like a really valuable community to be plugged into.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm so glad I did that.
Coming back to Personably, you all had gotten to the idea where you had sort of a scrappy version 1 together, to my understanding. You said, well, we need to have something before we get paid for it. So how long did that take, putting something together to get out into the ecosystem?
So it took us about 2 months to basically build something that worked between us.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a really scrappy version 1. So basically what the version 1 did is it let you create lots of different onboarding sessions in the product, and then you would click a button and then it would add it all to your calendar. And it would like add them one after the other. So there was no idea of checking when people are free or anything more complicated. It would just like put them in your calendar, and then you had to drag them to times when that would be useful. And that was still more useful than doing it manually. And that was the goal. So we were trying to find that one pain point that was taking people a lot of time, that even if we could like go 30%, 40% of the way there to fixing it, it would still improve their workflow. So yeah, it took us 2 months to build that. We gave it to a guy called Joe Robbins, who leads the sales team at Regardless. And we were like, hey, we've just knocked this together. We would love you to try it out. Let us know what you think. And then he was like, oh, cool. I actually have a new starter on Monday. I'm going to use it for them. We were like, oh my God. Okay. I think it works, but
right out of the gate. Yeah.
Right out of the gate. And then obviously there were like issues with it, and then we fixed them, and then there were more issues with it, and then we fixed those. It was like amazing to basically get someone using it and get some real feedback. And I don't think we would have got to where we are now if we hadn't have done that so quickly. Like if we'd have just like put together a business plan and be like, this is what we think people want, we never would have learned as much as we did, being like, okay, let's just knock something up and learn through that basically.
So at this stage, there's still no money coming in. At what point did you all start to get paid or start to raise some funds?
We got to the 6-month mark and we were like, okay, we could really use some money at this point. And we spoke to, we're super lucky to be in a situation where like we're both still quite young, like we don't have dependents. I've seen people do this with families and a lot more people to support and a lot more outgoings. And I'm always very, very impressed that they've managed to do that. So we're kind of like in that sense, we're definitely lucky. But yeah, we got to the point where we were like, okay, we actually do need some money coming in. So basically, so we can like reinvest it in the product as well as pay ourselves.
That seems like kind of a big deal. Like, hey, we need to be able to eat and pay rent.
Yeah, we got to the point where we were like, okay, we're sort of like running low on what we'd managed to save up from our previous jobs. And we basically spoke to Regardless and Monzo, and we were like, hey, like we think, you guys have been using this product for a few months now. Like you can see where it's going and you could see what we want to do with it. We are saving you time. Could you possibly pay us for it? And also, could you give us 12 months in advance?
That is the most British pitch I've ever heard. Be like, oh, excuse me, I'm terribly sorry if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always really hard asking people for money when you're like just starting and you've just built this thing and you know kind of what's going on under the hood and you know what it was a few months ago. Like you forget that it's actually like you are doing something valuable and you're saving people time and you're making people's workflows easier. And also businesses have budgets to pay for things that save their staff time. Like it's not a new concept that businesses pay for products. So yeah, I think once we'd like got over that initial like very British hurdle, we asked Monzo and Regardless if they could pay us upfront to give us the cash that we needed to basically keep going.
Fantastic.
And they did, and it was great.
Oh, I jumped the gun on that fantastic. Or I was like, yes. And you're like, no, wait, they did pay us.
Yeah. So yeah, that was in like June, July time last year.
So is that how you all went about it? You just bootstrapped and got money as you went along? Or was there any other investment streams that you sort of got involved with?
Not that early on. So because we were both technical, like we did look at whether we could work on it, like split our time basically. We were trying to figure out if maybe we could contract on the side, working on other tech products. But I just think with tech startups, you just need to put so much of your energy into being creative and trying to look at a problem and solve it. And there's just so much like emotional work, like so much creative work that needs to happen that I couldn't really devote any time at all to doing other contract work. I'm one of those people that just needs to like focus on one thing and just like go through it, as opposed to I can't really do two different projects to the best of my ability.
Well, it sounds very much like the pitch on that is, why not try doing 0.5 really intensive full-time jobs? And that seems like it would be a mission for anyone.
Yeah.
So we're about 6 months in. You've got a little bit of runway from having 2 clients prepay for a year. That sounds really incredible. What happened next?
We basically got to the point where we had a bit more runway. We didn't have enough money to hire anybody. And we knew what we needed to do to build out the product to where our customers and the other companies that we were speaking to about it wanted the product to be. So we're basically at the limit of what 2 people could do. And that's kind of the point where I think it was a good decision to basically say, okay, we actually need to go for some more serious funding now, so that we're in a position to hire people to basically execute on this to where it could be.
So you sat down and you came to this decision. What's the first step? Many of our listeners may not have gone for funding before, may not have reached out to investors before. How do you even start?
I think the first step with fundraising is basically figure out how much money you need to get to the next stage in your business, basically. That's the like ballpark. And that might be like £50,000 or that might be £500,000. And then once you've got that number, then you can figure out where you need to go for that funding. So if it's like £50,000 or £100,000, that's typically like angel fundraising. That falls within the £150,000 SEIS tax break that the government offer. So it's a bit easier to get angel money within that. If you're looking for something like £500,000, £1 million, which some businesses will need that to get going, like you'll typically see startups that have come off something like Entrepreneur First or like Y Combinator, who are doing something deeply technical and they actually need like a few million even to get going. That's when you're typically in the realm of looking at venture capital funds. So we were kind of in the middle of that.
So yeah, what approach did you take? Who did you decide to talk to first?
So we decided that because we were basically building a product that solved the problem for fast-growing companies, right? And the companies that grow the fastest are the ones that are funded by venture capital firms. So it was kind of a bit of a strategic move. We were like, okay, who can we talk to that has a lot of potential customers for us in their portfolio that we could reach out to, as well as really understanding the problem, because they've advised so many of their portfolio companies that have had this issue. That like narrowed it down a bit for us. There are only a few funds that actually will write a 500K check as well, which is how much we decided to raise. So yeah, they were basically the funds that we went to speak to.
So for folks who may not have had experience with this before, how do you decide how much you need? Is it just a ballpark? This is what we think it's going to take, you said, to get to the next level. But how would calculations around that work? Do we need a designer? Do we need an office? Do we need a...
Yeah. So we kind of, it's not an exact calculation. You sort of figure out how many people that you need. So we were like, okay, we'll probably need 6-7 people total. And you want to give yourself about 18 months of runway, because typically it'll take another 6 months to fundraise. So you don't want to raise a year's worth of money and then be having to be starting fundraising again in 6 months, because it's quite hard to show that you've got to that next level in 6 months. So you basically need to give yourself minimum 12 months, like preferably 18 months worth of runway, which kind of gives you some contingency. Then be like, okay, we need 6 or 7 people's or maybe more people's salary, and figure out what you're going to pay people, sort of. So be like, okay, generally because you're a startup, it'll be you take market rate and then you'll cut it and you'll like put some equity into that consideration. Founder salaries are normally should not be anywhere near market rate at that stage. So yeah, you kind of figure that out. Like you factor in office space as well. Office space is the other big cost. We're quite lucky right now because one of our angel investors runs a company called Nested, and they have a few desks free in their office. So we're currently squatting with them, which is great.
So all of this is really fantastic. Have an idea of how many people you need to hire, take a really, really critical look at what non-financial resources your funding stream might be able to give you. But the suspense is killing me. How did it go? Who did you wind up talking to?
So we spoke to a few different venture funds, and in the end, we decided to work with a fund called Global Founders Capital, which is the venture arm of Rocket Internet. Rocket Internet build companies like nobody else does. So they're known for hyperscaling, basically. So it was a perfect fit for us in terms of portfolio companies that we could work with. So that was pretty much it. So we raised that I think we started fundraising in September. We had actual money in the bank at the end of December. As you know, it was like 1st or 2nd of January. I think it would have happened quicker had we not been trying to get payments in over that Christmas period, where there's only 2 banking days in like 2 weeks. I got the money in the beginning of January. Ruth, the developer that I'd learned to code with, I'd sort of been like prepping her, saying like, this is what we're doing. This is what we're fundraising. Like, we think we're going to be able to hire you. Do you want to come and work for us? So she like handed in her notice, like beginning of January.
How scary.
And she joined us.
Yeah. How scary and wonderful. Your first hire.
Yeah, it's really fun. It's definitely interesting, like moving from it just being me and my co-founder for the first year to having someone else here, but it's amazing.
So working with them, did you get what you expected, or was there some kind of back and forth? So if you come in, what do you wear to that, a suit?
No, so I think it's like the classic startup thing, right? Generally people don't show up to interviews in suits. Similarly, like you don't really show up to a VC meeting in a suit. So yeah, I think I was wearing like jeans and like a shirt.
Fantastic. So I'm going to remember to get a cute hoodie the the first time I need to go for funding.
Yeah, do the Zuckerberg thing.
Very, like some Converse. I'll look very cool, a bit aloof. Is there some sort of back and forth, or do you say, I need 500,000? They're like, yeah, 500,000.
So you say, I need 500,000, and they kind of go, why? And I say, I need to hire, like, we need another developer, we need a salesperson, we need a designer, we probably need an ops or a marketing hire. And that's the team that we need to execute on our roadmap, which we know is accurate based on our conversations with these customers that we already have and these other conversations that we've been having. So you kind of look at that and they kind of go, okay, that makes sense. That will give you about the right amount of time as well in order to like get to that stage.
And there's no temptation to sort of Silicon Valley that out and be like, so we need a beer fridge and we need to buy an office dog.
I think at that point, you're just so glad to be able to pay yourself a salary that like beer fridge and office dog, like definitely comes last.
It can wait for Series A.
Yeah, I'm sure there's probably some like, I don't know, there must be like an inverse correlation between companies that do well and companies that have tons of perks to convince employees that they're having fun. So,
this is something I feel very strongly about as someone who exists within the tech industry. Every time I go in and I'm like, you all have sleep pods. It must be terrible to work here.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing that I mentioned before, but I did law at university and the law firms have sleep pods as well.
Oh no.
And they lock them during the day so you can't have a nap.
What?
Yeah, genuinely. So when I got a tour around one of these big city law firms and they showed us that, I was like, I am out.
Yeah.
Like, this is not what I want to do.
Do you know what? I'll go someplace with great work-life balance. I'm going to get into tech.
Yeah, I'm happy to like work hard and pull long hours, but the things that they were kind of trying to sell us on at the law firms, I was like, I don't find this that interesting. So I don't want to work 19 hours a day for that.
I'm not a sucker. No, thank you.
Yeah.
So what I'm really interested in hearing is we've gotten to the point in your story where you've got into global founders, say, we need 500K. You've had a polite conversation back and forth wearing jeans and a hoodie. And then they give it to you. What does that feel like?
We were just like shocked, I think. Well, not shocked because we knew that we'd done the work that we needed to do. But yeah, it was just amazing to know that we had the money, that we were going to have the money that we needed to grow the business. I think one of the things that surprised me about fundraising, even though I used to work at a company that used to help founders fundraise, is it is so time consuming and it takes up so much of your energy. And it takes your energy away from building product and talking to customers, which feel like the most important things you should be doing. But then you do need to raise money, otherwise you won't be able to do those things anymore. So it's like this weird balance between investing in the future of the company, but then also like dealing with everything that you need to deal with currently as well.
What kind of advice did people give you when you said, hi, we're about to start looking for VC funding? Did you chat to folks and get some advice about that?
So there were a few people we spoke to. We spoke to some other founders about it. And I think their advice was basically just know your shit. Like you can kind of predict, you can probably do enough Googling and figure out like what you're going to be asked. So have good answers to those questions. You shouldn't be thinking them up for the first time on the spot. We definitely made that mistake in some of the earlier meetings that we did with some of the other funds where we didn't have good answers to questions that we should have had a good answer to. Yes.
So if our dear listener is thinking that they really want to go, they've got this idea, they've been working on an MVP, they want to go for funding, what kinds of questions might they expect?
There are a few areas of questions that you will get, and you will probably be weak on at least one of them. One of them is around the team. Does the team have the experience and the credibility to do what they say they're going to be able to do? So typically with like deep tech companies, you'll get, someone will have a PhD in something relevant and someone else will have come from an enterprise company. So you have tech and the sales. Typically with startups like ours, we had experience of the problem ourselves. So we understood it. And we could also have the skills we needed to build and develop the product. So we didn't have to hire somebody to do that to start with, which was super helpful. You'll also get questions around the market size. And I think that's the one that we fell down on in some of those early meetings. You need to not be able to just show why you can sort of sell to your current early adopter market, but you need to be able to say, actually, this is like a really big opportunity. It's not just startups, it's big corporates as well. And the opportunity can shift in this way. Or VCs need to be able to see how it can be a $1 billion company, because the idea is that they'll invest in 10 companies. One of them will return the whole fund, and then the other 2 will kind of do okay. And then the other 7 will just like middle along, or they'll fail. So they need to bet on every company, basically assuming that that's going to happen.
Yeah, that seems like a really challenging one for folks who do want to build sustainable, sort of very grounded companies.
Yeah.
Would the advice to them be not lie, but maybe spin it a little bit?
So you need to be like, if you're going to take venture capital funding, you need to be able to pitch the big vision, but you don't have to take venture capital funding. Like that's the answer there. There are some smaller funds. There are also like angel money is a really good source of basically people who would take like a 3x return on their money would be a great result for them.
A 3x return on your money sounds like a great result. Like I'd take that any day.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's just like the mechanics of the way some of those venture capital funds work is that they need to be able to see the like 10x. Otherwise they can't make the bet. And at startup stage, it is about the team, market, and are you solving a problem that people have, basically, and do you have proof of that? And that's kind of the traction point. So if that's a consumer product, it'll be like there'll be a number of signups and a number of users. If that's a B2B product, that might be revenue, or again, like a number of businesses trialing it and actually using it.
So what do you wish you had known, aside from you're going to get questions like these? What other advice or what other tips do you wish you had known before you went into this process?
I think, so some of this I think I knew already. Like I did know this going in, but it just surprised me again, is like it will probably take longer than you think it will. So like you should allow, if you're going to try and raise a funding round, you need to allow 6 months for it. We did it in 4, but we had some really good intros that meant we could cut out some of the initial phase of basically like emailing investors and not getting replies, which does happen.
That sounds like a really soul-destroying initial phase.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same as like sales though, really. So I think as a founder, like you definitely need to get used to people not replying to your emails. That's like key, especially if you're a sales founder. It will take longer than you think it will, and it will be more distracting than you think it will. So if you can try and, it's a bit difficult at seed, but if you have a co-founder, try not to bring both founders into it, or try to bring the second founder in as late as you possibly can. So at least someone is continuing to build the product and talking to customers. I think those would be my main 2 pieces of advice. Yeah. And third one would be look up, do some Googling, do your research, do your due diligence on the different funds as well. So like talk to founders that have been invested in by those funds and see the way that those funds have been dealing with them, the way they operate. Do your research as well, as because that fund will definitely do their research on you.
This is really fantastic advice. We're going to have to wrap up in a few minutes, but you've told us some really valuable things about how you all got started, getting those first customers, getting that little bit of cash to sort of stick in there and stick with it, and then going through this VC process. Can you tell me about what's next for Personably?
I think the biggest thing that's next is we need to hire some more people. So there's people like those hypothetical hires I mentioned earlier. We do really need them. So if you're listening to this and you're a product designer, B2B sales, or a like mid-level engineer, please get in contact with me. I'm on Katerina@personably.co.
These are all roles based here in London?
Yeah, they're all based in London right now.
It has been absolutely fantastic to get to chat with you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's been really great to speak.
And thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to keep up with what we're doing at the Pursuit Podcast, you can find us on Twitter @PursuitPod. We'll see you next Tuesday with a brand new episode.